Welcome, everybody. I think a few more people might be coming in. That's fine. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. And just so you know, if you're sitting in front, you have to stay for the whole meeting. Just kidding. Okay. Hope everybody's recovered or recovering from the storm and getting your power back if you lost power. Always another great test of community and people coming together. As many of you are here, I'm sure, because it's the first reading of the budget. Just to let you know, we will be doing that shortly, and it will be, we'll go over, do an overview of it. And it is a first blush. It is not, as you know, many of you know, it's how we start at a starting point. Things can go up and down. We know we'll hear from people about different positions, about different aspects of the budget. And that's why we do it. It's already been a couple of months, at least. It starts with the staff, with the admin, going over everything and coming up with things they need, things they want. And of course, then we have to pare things down, figure out what we can afford, look at how that affects the towns. It's a big process. And I want to just thank everybody for being a part of that process and having been a part of that process up to this point. And now we get to introduce it to the public and we get to hear from everybody. And it's a great process. And we know not an easy one this year because of COVID funding, because of rising prices for so many things. And so we will just move forward and work together through it. So thank you all for being here. And I'm sure some of you may want to speak during public session to do that. To start, we're going to I need to approve minutes. If everyone has had a chance to look at minutes. And I just either need a motion or if you want to amend them, let me know.
Move approval, if
Okay.
no one has any questions.
Can I have a second? Second by Megan. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, that passes. And now here we are at public session. If anyone would like to come up to the microphone to speak on anything that's on the agenda today, you're welcome to. Damien's making sure it's turned on. Okay. Anyone? Can you just give us your name, please? And
Liz Holbrook.
Liz Holbrook.
Good evening. I am a taxpayer of Phippsburg as well as a business owner in Bath. I am aware that you have received a number of letters and emails, including one from the district's physician that has supported keeping Phippsburg's nurse full-time 5 days a week. I want to make sure all of those letters and emails are included in this meeting's minutes so that all of the public and the media may have access to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, I'm Micah Crowley. I'm a resident of Phippsburg. I'm also a taxpayer of Phippsburg, and I'm currently employed at RSU1. I have 2 children in the district, and I'm also a staff member at Phippsburg. And I understand that this is a challenging year budget-wise for this district, but I feel strongly that all schools should be given the same bare minimum of services prior to additional services being given to other schools. There should be priority given to Phippsburg in regards to their nurse remaining full-time, the boost position, and the social work position. Our students and community deserve the same access as the other students. We may be small in numbers, but our needs are the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Matthew D'Angelo. I'm a teacher here at Morse High School. This is my first year at Morse High School, and I really love this school. I've enjoyed every minute of being here, and I'm really disappointed to hear that my position is being eliminated. At least that is the proposal, and I sincerely hope that that proposal does not become the actual decision. So I would just like to say that if given the opportunity, I would love to teach here for many more years. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Mary McCauley. I've taught in the school district, many different of the schools for over 30 plus years. Sorry, I have this out in front of me. I didn't get a chance to print it out, but I have worked in several different elementary schools, and some of the schools had full-time nurses, some didn't, and I saw the effects of when we didn't. I never quite understood that concept because it was usually based on the size of the school, and it was based on the number of students. And to me, that's it just doesn't sit well, because I've taught in schools where there were classes of 6, there were classes of 9, there were classes of 10. Did the teacher come only 3 days a week, 4 days a week? A nurse is still so important to the school that having a nurse there only a couple days a week can be dangerous and cannot be that helpful. I'm going to scroll down here, sorry. So a nurse's responsibility is endless, and I see it all the time. I've worked teaching over, about 40 years, only 31 in this district. And I've seen differences when the nurse is not in the building and when she is or he is in the building. They deal with the chronic needs of students. They administer medicine. They communicate with parents on many different issues. They assist in the evaluation of students for special ed. They administer vision and hearing tests. And set up dental clinics, and I could go on and on. And that is only just basically the day-to-day physical stuff. I mean, there's emotional things that they deal with too. And it's not just ice packs and Band-Aids. A couple things that stood out in my years of teaching is the few times that serious accidents happened in my gym class, and there was not a nurse on duty, a nurse in the school. And I had to deal with it. I felt like I should step in because I'm certified wilderness trainer. It was really difficult. One of the cases where a girl dislocated her elbow. And I think I look back there, my friends from Dyke Newell, they may remember it. There was no nurse in the building. It was the end of the day. I remember Kim, she couldn't really help me. She's dealing with buses, kids being dismissed. And I'm trying to comfort this girl with a dislocated elbow. No nurse. We ended up calling, I think it was you. You had to come over from another school. She wasn't there. And it took a prolonged amount of time to get this girl the right treatment she needed. That just stood out. And I've seen other ones, broken fibs, other things, when the nurse was not in the building. But that was my worst one that happened, that I had to deal with. I also want to end, and I could go on, and sorry, I sound a little nervous, but I don't know why. But I will send you a study that I found on school nurses not only make a difference for student health and academic achievement, but they also save money. So a study was done back in 2014. For every dollar that is spent on a school nurse, our society saves $2.20. The money shouldn't be a factor. It's the importance of the school nurse being in that building because of all of the things that have to be taken care of by a school nurse. And it shouldn't be left up to the secretary or, the gym teacher. There's very important stuff that we need a school nurse for. And I strongly support 5 days a week for our school nurse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Melissa Smith. I'm a taxpayer in Bath, and I'm also a teacher, a special ed teacher at Phippsburg Elementary School. I should have been as smart to write it down because I'll never be as eloquent as Mary. But I'm deeply disturbed that we're considering getting rid of a full-time nurse. I could go on and on in my short time at Phippsburg of relying on our nurse currently, whether it was with a restraint with a child and having a professional nearby to make sure I was doing everything correctly. But also, I feel like it sends the message to our students that they're just not worthy of that kind of treatment. And some of our kids that's their only access to healthcare. So that really bothers me. Not to mention the position that's going to leave us with, even though it's a 1-day-a-week position, we have a day of the week for this individual, and he provides amazing social work to my kids, and they show me the strategies that they've learned and they're practicing them. So the social work position, even though it's 1 day a week, and our school nurse are just so valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Molly Maurer. I'm an academic interventionist at Fisher Mitchell School. This is my 4th year teaching and my 3rd year at Fisher Mitchell. And I absolutely love teaching in RSU1. It has been a joy teaching. And because of COVID funds and COVID positions being cut, my position is being cut. And my biggest concern is how we're going to meet the student needs because of COVID increasing the academic needs of our students, particularly in math. And it concerns me because we have 75 points of service we're providing at Fisher Mitchell School. And I currently have a caseload of 26 points of service. And if my position gets cut, then 2 teachers are going to be splitting a caseload of 75 points of service. And I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to meet the needs of our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Right. Oh, go ahead, Abby.
Hi, I'm Abby Lukes. I am a employee of RSU1. I'm also a Woolwich resident and a taxpayer. So I guess my question is, I don't know if the board can provide this to the taxpayers. Can we find out how our taxes would change if we kept the social workers and we kept the interventionists and the teachers in the high school? Like, if we kept everybody, could we find out how much that's going to cost? Because as a taxpayer, I think I would be very comfortable doing that for the kids. So I know it's a really big number, the budget increase, but maybe when it gets trickled down, we would see it's obviously going to cost us more, but we would be willing to do that as a community for the community.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that insight. Anyone else? Public? Well, thank you all for speaking up. And when we go over, we'll go over the budget later for an overview and stuff, and then obviously talk about how this is going to proceed, so you'll know how everyone can participate and how we're going to look at some of what Abby's referring to and other things, because we've been looking at that now and continue to see how things develop and how that changes and all the different changing numbers. So appreciate hearing from all of you. We can go to because we didn't have any actual adjustments, right? So we'll go right to it if you want to take it.
So Dustin, you got a big audience, and you probably know you know everybody in the room too. So, but I'd like to introduce Dustin Ward to our school board, and Dustin has been with us for, hard to believe, 2 years now, leading our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And he's been working closely with our district committee, but he also has provided training to 98% of our employees in the district, and has gotten us off to a really good start. So tonight, I just want to give the board an overview of what we've done and then where we're going as next steps. Absolutely. So Dustin, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah.
And we usually, we might have 2 people in the audience, so show them your stuff.
I've been talking to all of you, but I feel most nervous in quite a packed house. So First, let me say I truly appreciate this opportunity. Been working with you all for a little over 2 years now, and to take this as the first opportunity to introduce myself, more or less an apology that I haven't come sooner, but glad I could actually be here. So I am by title a racial equity and reconciliation advocate. There's multiple pieces to that, but mostly you all have probably heard it as diversity, equity, inclusion work. I see it as racial equity work, which is why the thing that you have before you is called educational equity, which is where I think a lot of this conversation is heading. But it is encompassing diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial equity as well. Tonight, one thing I absolutely recognize is to give a board something 5 minutes before a meeting probably is infuriating and annoying. I'm a select board member over in New Gloucester, so I recognize that. So I want to apologize for its late entry, but also want to go over it with you in brief. And at your leisure, please feel free to read more in depth. There's tons more information I can give you, but this will be part of an overview. Starting on that first page, the reason I put the mission, the why. One of the big things that I've told all of the educators you have before you and throughout the district, you need to ground yourself in a why. Because every time you come into this work, day in and day out, you need to know why you're doing it. And so part of that in that italics place is really to think about how can we be a more welcoming environment for students, staff, administration, and all stakeholders. The focus being on producing educational outcomes along with better opportunities to improve the day-to-day lives of students, including access and equity. This is what has grounded all of the work we've done the last 2 years. And I will say that I think you're seeing the remnants and the reality of the why as well. Your educators, your staff, your administration, all of your stakeholders, they care. They care to the point that they're willing to come out tonight, but they care and we're very engaged in the why. And I think it grounded so much of the work. So I put the why in there so that you know, as we move forward, this is what we keep coming back to. This is what we're engaged in. The foundation principles, though, are part of what I bring as my framework for educational equity. And it all stems from humanity and identity. It's a key piece to what educational equity will produce, which is honoring one's humanity and identity. And in that, as I did the trainings, as we did the conversation, and I'll go into more detail about that, you cannot move forward with this work unless those two things are honored. And that's why at the very end, it doesn't matter how many programs, how many policies, how many educational pieces you put together, if you do not have your humanness in the work, and if that is broken, none of those things will be fixed until that is fixed. So that is a key foundational principle for the work that I've offered as a framework and for the work that you do moving forward. As you turn, one of the things that as I was contracted, one of the questions was, okay, what's the goal? Where are we going? And I'm all about setting goals. The big three was wanting to provide training and education. We wanted to begin to bring in an understanding of these terms, concepts, especially at the height when I first came in. We were still in the process of just trying to learn. Why were we engaged in this racial reckoning era, which began in 2020, but as I've educated many folks here, it's begun way longer than that. But just in these last few years, we needed to have a plan as to educating both administration, educators, and staff on what these key topics are. So a big thing was training education. The second was to create a space where you could ask questions. Far too often, education and training is great, but if there's no place to ask the critical questions and to help all those within the district, then there's no point. So I wanted to create a space where you could ask key questions. And then finally, you got to have a way to implement it and consider how is it going to impact the actual district. So everything we did from the first time I was contracted until right now has been around those three concepts. And again, it's pillars of my own business, which is learn, think, act. We learn, we get educated, we understand the history. There are spaces to ask questions so we can begin to empathize and learn, and that way all of our actions are genuine. And so that's what the goals were as I began to sort of build and contract with the district. So what have we been up to? You'll see, first thing, back in 2022, which feels like a lifetime ago, some of these great administrators who are here tonight engaged with me in a series of sessions that began to sort of open eyes into the conversations that we were having. And I provided for you sort of that outline of what I had contracted initially. But it was 5 2-hour sessions in this very room, which has become like home for me, actually. But it was in this very room that we took a journey as administrators. And we looked at an initial survey assessment. I assessed the administrators just to say, where are we at? You know, I asked some key critical concepts and questions to say, where are you at with this conversation? And by doing that, I used that survey and assessment to begin an introduction into these topics. From there, we engaged in a lot of our introductions of ourselves. This is where we learned about our identity. We looked at historical background of identity. We defined terms like race, racism, white privilege, white supremacy, and other terms of identity. We shifted there into concepts of colorblind racism. And then we looked at Black culture then and Black culture today. Now, again, remember the context that we were sort of in. We were in a racial reckoning. So the conversations around Black members and Black and brown bodies and white individuals was very key. What we learned, though, along the way is that can be our starting point, but it grows because there are other identities in the room that many of the conversations that we had also overlapped. So by the time we were done, as you can see on that final piece, was trauma and healing work. It's conversations and thinking about our own identity. What does it mean to heal from when our identity is harmed or our humanity is harmed? And so that was that final piece that sort of ushered in the next phase. So after we worked with the administration, then came the DEI District Committee, which I was honored to be asked to sort of lead over the course of last year and something. As you'll see, the purpose of that committee, we understood one, it was a recommending body, and that was very important. But again, that focus was to provide that feedback, in addition to also engage in ongoing learning opportunities. So I didn't want it just to be workshopping, but also learning as we move forward. And in order to do that, we took 2 books. One was by Eddie Glaude, which I absolutely love. So if you want a book to read, Eddie Glaude's Begin Again. He takes a journey with Baldwin, and he sort of understands the history of this conversation. So it was a little bit of historical work that the DEI committee did. And then the second book, which you should add as well, is Henry Turner's Changing the Narrative, How to Foster an Anti-Racist Culture in Your School. These 2 books have become the backdrop of the ongoing learning that we are doing, in addition to the workshopping that we are doing as well. So as you'll see, the goals of this committee: 1, we wanted to assess the policies, public statements, or any other written documents that we could create. We wanted to think about programs and extracurricular as well, which looked at the limitations and barriers you might see. And then we wanted to consider the daily school environment. What does it look like for a student to attend day in and day out? How can we assess with the backgrounds and the goals that we had just talked about? One of the things I felt was important is first the framework. As you'll see at the bottom, we did this as a large group. And for the most part, that had worked well. But for any reason, I also put, if there was a need that we needed to divide into smaller groups, we would so on an as needed basis. But most of our work we were able to do as a larger group. So that was excellent. And then we've started to offset weeks with book group meetings and actual workshop meetings. So we actually divided up the work in between those meetings. And then finally, I put a little addendum there about curriculum. When I first originally did the contract, I recognized that curriculum takes more than just one individual, one facilitator. I knew that I wouldn't be able to get to all of the curriculum or all the concepts of how to engage in equity for the curriculum. However, it isn't like it didn't come up. So although conversations around curriculum have been there, I would both advise and I would say that it was important for me to recognize I couldn't do all of that and fix that in 2 years. So that will be an ongoing conversation that you will have. So what has the committee been able to produce? First, you have, and I will say first and foremost, this is a draft, because one of the things that always comes out of committees is wanting to get buy-in. So right now, what you're seeing before you is the draft. It is the DEI commitment. You could call it a DEI statement, but we felt like this is more of a commitment. What is it that we want the RSU1 district to uphold as a commitment? So again, in draft form, as of now, you have that before you. And for those here, I'll read it aloud. But again, it is a draft, folks. You need buy-in. And before you can get buy-in, you have to take the extra journey of bringing it before people and hearing from folks. But let me read it for you. We intentionally welcome, build, and foster relationships across multiple diverse lived experiences and perspectives with the intention that people feel seen, heard, and respected. Recognizing this as a dynamic and complex process, we practice self-awareness. We support and maintain an ongoing commitment which drives us towards an inclusive community that is accessible to everyone. That statement, which I hope soon you will draft as an embodiment of everything you do DEI related, how you read your budget, how you look at your education, how you look at hiring, all of the pieces of what makes up the RSU1 district, I hope this will be that commitment. For now, though, this is what the DEI committee has worked tirelessly on, and I'm really proud of them for this. As you can see, this was authored right now by the representatives of the RSU1 district and their committee as of January 2024. So this is fresh off the press. One of the things, though, is also written for your community. Our feeling is that anybody who interacts with the RSU1 district should also uphold this as well. So as you begin to get buy-in, one of the things that you should also recognize is we want the community to also engage with this as they interact with the schools, which is a huge piece. After the commitment, we also added a method of processing that DEI commitment. How would you bring a DEI lens into a conversation? We say you got to see and notice, you have to acknowledge, and you have to act. And you can sort of see the steps there as well. But that is an overarching, how do you make this DEI commitment a reality? Moving to page 5, not only did we do a DEI commitment, but as of right now, we are engaging in an equity toolkit. We call it the Equitable Questions for Equitable Spaces. This equity toolkit, as we are finalizing it in this last part of the year before the summer, is designed to help educators and staff and administration ask the critical questions so that you can engage in equity within the schools. Our hope is that as we finalize that, again, it will need buy-in, it will need beta testing to see how well it works. But for right now, I wanted you to know that that toolkit looks to provide an equity lens for education. And then finally, the DEI committee has also been building a Changing the Narrative list, which is basically a list of what will soon become the recommendations for how do you move this work forward? What else could you possibly do? And so there's a list of everything from creating buy-in, DEI leadership outside of the classroom, and DEI leadership inside the classroom, and helping your community see the work. And again, there's a lot there. I know you have a full agenda, so I don't want to belabor it too much, but you have sort of a list of what they'll look like. There's a much larger 10-page document that I can certainly share if you want. Last but not least, after all of this, one of the conversations that the assistant superintendent and I had is, how do we get this in the schools? And one of the concepts that we came up with and that the superintendent thought as well was a really valuable concept was a cultural awareness cohort. It is something I have never done. So it was, I asked the group to sort of take a chance on it, but it was a design to go into each of the schools and actually bring a lot of this education. And so I'm actually really delighted to see some of those educators who were here who were part of that training. First and foremost, it was a way to continue the education further. A space to ask questions, a space to think critically, a place to now practice leading these conversations, but also organize around learning, thinking, and acting. And so the program was set up to be part of professional development. We had anywhere from 3 to 4 sessions that we set up throughout the last part of the year. And each and every school has either is represented in those, but I have attended and been a part of each and every school, including non-instructional staff. It has been an absolute pleasure to engage in each of those schools, to see them, to get a sense of how they feel, and to also work with and talk with each of the educators, answer questions, and just enjoy sort of hearing from them as well. So what I put there is what that program looked like and what it entailed. Terms and language. We talked about our personal narrative. We talked about active listening, hearing about another culture. We talked about facilitation and what that looks like. We brainstormed and considered how this would impact the school. And through it all, we actually talked about identity, norms and guidelines, what is DEI and how does it look? And then I asked some tough questions, such as what may hold you back from engaging in DEI work, which brought about some great answers. And then I asked, think about DEI 1, 3, or 5 years from now, what would it look like? All of that information is now collected, and I'm sharing it with the assistant superintendent as part of where does this work go. The other key thing is to always celebrate your victories. And I know Bath Middle School in particular has done some really great work too about the humanity language that's now in their code of conduct, DEI groups that have formed, behavioral consequences and restorative justice, and also just how homerooms now have humanity as part of their conversation. That came out of the learning that happened over this past year. So well done to all of those in Bath Middle School. And I'm sure there's other victories in other schools. And so please celebrate those. Here are my final thoughts. One of the big things too is next steps. As you sort of are reading is, one, we want to take the Change the Narrative document, and I want to submit that to you as part of where can this work go? Where are the places you'll want to uncover and think about a DEI lens through that? The other key piece is now you'll need to refocus on your policies, practices, procedures, your budgets. Everything will have a new lens to it. And so it may mean some shifting and changing of how you operate. And finally, a key step will be the equity toolkit, getting it into schools and seeing how does it work with teachers and educators and staff, and does it do the job that it needs to do. And then finally, just some parting thoughts, not leaving anytime soon, but just after tonight, I want you to know it has been an absolute pleasure and a delight to do this work. We've had tough conversations. We've had good conversations. I don't take this work lightly. This was not easy, but every day it is an absolute treat to engage with all of your educators and with the district. I work in other school systems, and I will go on camera and saying that this is one of my favorites and one of the best because of what you see before you, how engaged, how excited, how thoughtful, and how provocative all of your educators are, how much your staff is. And to superintendent and the assistant superintendent, I want to thank you. This cannot be done unless there's buy-in from the top. Without your buy-in and your support in me and your confidence in me, this couldn't happen. So I thank you both from the very get-go for being there for me. And so with that, I'm happy to answer questions or leave in peace and let you all get to the rest of your meeting.
The board have some questions. Jennifer?
So one of the things I didn't get to read what was just given to me, but with the DEI commitment statement, I've been working on the policy committee now for like maybe 8 years or so.
Mhm.
And so what we've really been trying to do is define terms. And I didn't see DEI defined anywhere. And I saw a lot of the language around it,
Yep.
but because it's used so often and if it's used if these documents or these materials could be used for outside our bubble of education and everything, I was thinking it would be good to explain it. And then if there was any section that could just be like, this is how we've come to this, and in the educational world, because I think we assume vocabulary a lot because we're just all used to using the same vocabulary. And I think that's one of, particularly in this subject, that I really try to check my assumptions and also make sure that I'm not excluding anyone that doesn't have the same background knowledge that I do. So I think that would be my only question or comment would be is to try to define that right up front somewhere to help people.
When we post all of this and it's official, we can make sure that those definitions.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I bet any of your educators here could tell you the definition because they've all had the same exact training. But you're right. I think one of the conversations we had within creating this is definitions. Again, do you put that in there? Do you not? Something that absolutely can be considered because you're right. Having universal language is absolutely critical so that everybody knows coming in what's the expectation and what is the framework for those words.
Great. Other questions?
I think my question
Yeah,
is
go
for
ahead.
Katie, but will the board be able to access some of the training that Dustin offers? Only, we think about the policy committee and looking at the budget through that lens, but we haven't had the same opportunity that
Sure.
others have had
We
maybe.
have all. So what I will say is that's just sheets of paper and really the training company conversation and our contract with us. Maybe not a third act.
Bring him back. Yeah, we can. Yeah, that's a good idea because well, a couple of us have been on as representatives, but that doesn't cover the whole. You're right, all of our committees and what the whole board does. So we'll have to sit down, reevaluate, and see what's what. But it's that's really important. Thank you.
And then I think my only other question is, and again, this might be for Katie or Dustin or Patrick, will we evaluate as a district? In my day job, we talk a lot about the school to prison pipeline and do our disciplinary, the things that we do for discipline, are they effective and are they, outweighing young people of color, especially young men of color? And I guess that would just be my question for our district, if we can be looking at those things through that lens.
I think it's an excellent
Great.
question. Probably something that will, once you start to dig a little deeper, you'll find the answer to. But I think you're already using that DEI lens to say, okay, who are the individuals that are being harmed through our current policies and practices? That key question can lead you to good answers. So, but I think it's absolutely worth digging into because you could be finding out something that you're doing you didn't even realize, and that harm is cataclysmic. Absolutely.
And when we do start the actual audit, we'll get restricted and we'll have sort of two prongs. One will be policies under which we need to allow this part of for reflection of that, the other is practice. So that's that part hasn't started.
Great. Any other questions? Fantastic to see you. Thank you for being so succinct and really, which was such a big project and expressing it to the board. And it's been fantastic working with you. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
All right. We are at the now 8.1 Finance Committee. We're not going to speak too much on that. The Finance Committee really was preparing the budget and all of that kind of thing, which we'll get to when we get to the budget. So why don't we move on to 8.2 Facilities Committee? Patrick.
Yeah, just a brief update. Dyke Newell, Fisher Mitchell committee, visioning committee has started to meet, and we have another meeting this Thursday and doing the visioning process for a new pre-K to 5 elementary school. Even though we're still waiting, we're still going to be doing an application process that we have to go through. The other thing is we will be doing 4 applications for new schools to be on the list. So it will be Dyke Newell, Fisher Mitchell, it will be Bath Middle School, and it will be Phippsburg. So we will do applications for all 4 of those. And then I think probably next fall, that's when the visiting teams will come down and they will tour our schools and look at our applications. And then my guess would be maybe around the holidays next year is when the list would be released from the State Department of Education. And we would expect to be, near the top of the list for Dyke Newell, Fisher Mitchell. And I don't know where we would land with the other schools, but because of their age, it makes sense for us to go through that process of applying. And then we talked about our solar farm that we have. For those of you that don't know, we've invested in a solar farm in Pittston, and hopefully this, as early as this spring, if anybody's interested, Revision Energy has agreed to do some educational field trips if anybody has an interest. But we're also meeting with consultants this spring to talk about the financial savings that are supposed to be about $30,000 a year that are supposed to help the district. And over a 20-year period, it's supposed to be around, I think, $700,000 to $800,000. So we're in a solar farm, I think, with Brunswick School Department, Town Department, as well as York Hospital. And I think there's a couple other school districts there. So if you happen to be driving through Pittston and you see a solar farm, that's us. And I think that's it. Dennis went over some facility projects that we're doing now and some of the facility projects that we have in the budget. And that was about the extent of it. Patty, anything else? No? Okay.
Any questions on, yeah, go ahead.
Patrick, do we have a time, just a rough time frame, for not just the Dyke Newell Fisher Mitchell new school, but also for BMS? So I didn't know BMS was going to be an application. I'm just hearing. So
yeah, and we just feel like because of the age of our buildings, it doesn't hurt to apply. But again, we might be. There could be 150 schools in the state that apply, and we may end up being 85 on that list. But it'll give us an idea of where we would be.
So the time frame, could it be as soon as, would we be doing all those 3 schools together
No.
within the same 5 years, within
No,
the same
no,
2 years?
I think our goal is to get Dyke Newell and Fisher Mitchell pre-K to 5 done, and
Right.
I'm sure we'll have to do multiple other applications, not to be, negative, but multiple other applications for Phippsburg and BMS down the road, just like we have with, Dyke Newell and Fisher Mitchell before. I think this is our 3rd application that we've done for those schools.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? The most difficult question will be what to name the new school, right? We already have 4 names. Huh? All right. Let's see. Student board report. Aurora, do you have anything to report for us?
Yeah, so for starters, Caroline couldn't be here, but she did some stuff she wanted to share. So a lot of college decisions are being made because regular decisions were just released. The Credit Pathways program made a trip to Augusta to see the State House, and Morse hosted a Unified Champion Schools conference aimed at implementing unified programs into new schools to expand Unified's horizons. Just some other stuff. Spring sports started today, so that's tennis, track, things like that. The Spring Musical opens April 5th at 7 p.m. and they're performing Freaky Friday. And then on March 14th and 15th, 24 Bath Tech students ventured up to Bangor for the annual Skills USA Maine competition. We had a great year. We had a lot of people place. Harry Koffler and Rory Garnett earned first place in the MRE challenge. Mercedes White, Elise Bravo, and Izzy Simmons won gold in the CSI competition. Bella Orr won gold in architectural drafting, and Gwen Weaver won gold in culinary arts.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any questions for Aurora? All right, superintendent's report.
Aurora, maybe we should touch base next time because I don't have much of a report now that you've done that, which is good because we have a longer agenda. So thank you for all that. But I don't have anything else to report. So thank you.
Scoop the superintendent. Well done. Well done. You get extra points for that. All right. The financial report. That's Deb. Oh, is she out there? She's out there. Yeah, you want to let her know she's up.
She scared me for a minute.
Like she's out. There we go. No, Passover's not till the end of April. Sorry, I had to.
You know,
Had to.
it's hiding out there. No. All right. So am I on here? Yeah. All right. February. So we're looking at the end of February. We've spent 60% of our budget, so almost 25 million out of the $41 million budget. We have encumbered 12 million, which is the remaining salaries. And so we are at 89.3%, which is close to where we were last year. So this is a good way just to measure how we are spending. Once again, I just need to point out that we will be short in substitutes. I anticipate that we'll be short possibly up to $210,000. Various reasons, just basically more absences. We increased the sub rate a little bit. And also that the electricity right now, the full impact isn't known quite yet. I mean, it's just starting, but we haven't seen, the actual bills coming through with those new rates. As far as the revenue side, we're good with interest on investments. We're still positive about $300,000. So, and this is the time of year where I just have to remind folks to only purchase what they need because things can go fast in the last 3 months. So that's it.
Okay, so no fire sales. Got it. Thank you very much. Any questions for Deb on finances? Well, thank you very much. Okay, but now we're on board policy. Yeah. Okay. Now we're on 11.0 old business. We're now at second reading of board policies. This is an action. And just to reiterate, it's use of private vehicles for school business, the use of private vehicles for school business staff permission form, the student computer and internet use and internet safety, student computer and internet use rules, agreement to publish student information on school district websites, school district website web pages, administrative procedure. I think that's it, right? Yeah. So of those 6, are there any questions specifically? Yeah, go ahead.
Could I move that we accept them or reject them all together in one vote? Not
Yeah, that's what I was going to
individuals?
hope. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Move that
Yeah, and
if you need it. to.
no, you don't need it. I think we can agree that that's what we'll do, unless there was a problem with any of them. I just want to see if there's any questions on any specific policy after reading through it again. We got it. You all got it last time. Okay. So yes, so moving with that procedure, now a motion.
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Second by Jamie. Any further discussion or questions on that? No. All in favor? And those policies are approved. And we move on to new business. You see 12.1. Katie's not going to be discussing instruction updates. We have so much going on, right? Dustin was your update, right? Exactly. It's a good update to have, so that works. So that falls into that. So here we go. 12.2, first reading of the proposed school budget. We're gonna pass along these copies for you. I'm going to hand it over to Patrick to go over the broad view. And again, just as a reminder, this is first blush. This is based on a lot of different factors. And just getting back to some of the comments people were speaking of in the public session, we are looking at all the numbers. We are looking at the big picture. And this is, the first look at that. So again, thank you all for being here and speaking up. So Patrick, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
So I'm just going to give a brief overview and then open it up for board questions. And Deb might add a few things as well. And if we don't have enough handouts tonight, we can certainly provide you with more. We'll put it on our district website as well. But in 13 years, this is by far the toughest budget that we've had. We've been fortunate, I think, over the last 10 to 13 years to add a position to every single budget. And we are adding a couple to this budget out of necessity. So we'll go through this, but it is a difficult budget year. And, I guess I would preface it by saying the drivers of this is increased costs for utilities, for contracted services, transportation in general. That means our transportation contract. It means gas. It means out-of-district placements. And as you guys know, 65% of our budget is people. And that's the way it should be. That's what every school district has is, a fairly decent percentage that's on salary and benefits. The first draft that we go through, which this is the first reading, but the very first draft of the budget, we allow our administrators to work with you as staff and leadership teams to submit what you feel you need in a budget. And that budget came in at a 10.51% local contribution, which is a 7%, over 7% increase on the total expenses. So I know, Abby, you were asking about more and again, I preface this by saying there's no COVID positions in this budget. So so what you were asking for, I think, is for us to run some numbers where all of the COVID positions are in. But even without the COVID positions in there, it was 10.51 local contribution, 7.08 for increase to the total expenses. So the finance committee and board members that are at those meetings requested that the administrative team attempt to reduce this budget by, Deb had some different scenarios. She had 1 million, she had 1.2, and she had 1.5 million, and what it would do to the tax basis in our towns. So the request was to try to reduce this by 1.2 million. So we went back, and I'll share with you just roughly how we attempted to get there. And as Lou pointed out at the beginning of this meeting, the budget, it's a fluid process. We want people's input, but please understand we have to start someplace. And our goal was to try to start someplace where it least impacted staff and students. And I know you may not always agree with that as we go through this, but non-labor was 622,000 is what we cut. And that's not just supplies and equipment that you asked for. It's also things that came out of, could be technology, maintenance, operations and maintenance, special education. We usually put $50,000 in our capital improvement line, which helps for things that we need to do with our boilers, catastrophic things. We did not add that 50,000 in this budget this year because that fund is around 700,000. So it's healthy right now. Staffing was 559,000 is where, and that comes out to, 559,000. And I'll go through this fairly quickly, is retirement positions not being filled, one special education teacher at Fisher Mitchell, one special education teacher at BMS. And those are retirements or resignations. High school math teacher, high school Ed Tech 3 study hall monitor, technology integrator, which serves middle school and high school, outdoor classroom, which is 2 days a week, 1 day at Phippsburg and 1 day at Woolwich. Filling the Bath Middle School librarian position, which is a retirement with an Ed Tech. That is the staffing of roughly 550,000. And then student programs, 39,000, which is no longer doing the Chewonki Flow program for 8th graders and not doing the Chewonki 6th grade experience. So that comes out to be about $1.27 million for the board to consider. Again, no COVID funded positions in this budget. It doesn't mean that the board, I can't speak for the board. I work for the board, but I know we'll have discussion about the positions that are COVID, and then we'll have discussions about what's on this list and see where we can get. The things that were added to this budget out of necessity are 2 special ed techs and 1 ELL ed tech. And that's what's been added to this budget for student needs that we have to do from a case management standpoint and from a student needs perspective. On this list, on the front sheet, if you have one, you can see that by reducing it by 1.2 million, it brings down the local contribution to 4.18% and brings down over total expenses at 4.05%. So what does that mean for towns? Arousik is a 21% increase on the tax because of mostly Aroosik's our smallest community, and they're also up 5 students, 5.5 students from last year. So that drives that piece. For Bath, it's a 3.3% increase. For Phippsburg, it's 3.78% increase. And for Woolwich, it's 4.46%. And if you look at the very bottom of this sheet, on the front page, you'll just see that we try to run now it's a 7-year average. We probably can cut that back. But you can see over to the far right, even with Aroosik's kind of spike of 13% and the 21%, over a 7-year period, the average has been 4.92, but it is the highest out of all of our towns. So that's kind of a basic overview of where we are right now as a first reading. So I guess I would stop there and open it up to, is Deb in the room or is she still hiding outside?
I don't know. Did she leave? I think she left us again.
Yeah, or if the board has any questions.
Yeah, so does the board have some, after seeing this first overview, invite the board to ask some questions? You've been a part of this process now, but seeing how this has worked out. Yeah, Jennifer?
Thanks. So I guess my question would start with the non-labor supplies. And I don't know if after 10 years, I know this changes every year. I remember back when I was in this budget process myself. And so is there a further breakdown? Supplies are not, my understanding is that we're not talking about consumables for our curriculum, correct? Out of that number, Patrick?
Correct. I mean, we're getting what we need for our students in their curriculum.
Right. So those are the supplies that the teachers use to fulfill the curriculum in terms of what their units are and different things like that, right? It's there. And if that's been reduced, is there a certain percentage that they get at each year for their classroom? How does that number work out?
I mean, a total for each school, they ask for what they feel they need or want, and then we bring it down to a 3% increase from one year to the next by school based.
Okay. And I think there was a question about, earlier about how does this work for towns? And I would just probably say that, if you were to compare Woolwich and Bath, the impact to taxpayers in Bath is different than Woolwich because Bath has a huge resource for taxes because they have a lot more commercial business and they pay a lot more in commercial taxes. So that impacts the overall taxes in their town's budget versus a town like Woolwich that doesn't have that same level of revenue, either from the revenue that's created with sales tax or the revenue that's also returned to the state from the state in terms of revenue sharing. So that both goes into how the actual balance is for the individual taxpayer. So I think that there is a difference in how that works out for individuals. And I guess the last thing is when I look at this, I was thinking about the diversity and equity inclusion training and that documentation. And I try to look at this budget and think about, am I looking through it through my own kind of privileged view of my socioeconomic status? I also try to look at it through the view of people who are making 80% of AMI and lower and with kids and how that impacts individuals. It often impacts renters more than it does homeowners. And so renters being usually low-income families or lower-income families and homeowners, is that I feel that every increase that we do to our tax base makes our affordable housing less and less, makes our housing less affordable, and we're in such a crisis for that now. So instead of thinking about what it would matter to an upper class person in my community, I often think of this budget and thinking, how would it impact the people with less resources to pay their taxes? What would they be having to give up? And what kind of life do they live in for the luxury of what we try to provide our kids? And I want to provide all these resources possible. And I've heard from a lot of people that the social work resources are really, really important. And I guess my question is if it's really important to add more social work in, I would look at it as saying, what do we take out? Not like, what do we do? And, if we have a program that's going to replace the need for social work resources, and I'm like, let's do that. But each program that we add, if it doesn't help meet that social work need that so many people say, I ask, well, what can we do either one, not both? And that's just my personal lens, how I look at my own finances and how I look at the financial impact to everybody in my town and also to all of our teachers in our school communities. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Jamie, go ahead.
So the budget that we have here has the Pittsburgh nurse at 0.4, 0.2. And so for that one position, what would the local contribution increase to?
I mean, Deb would have to run those numbers and get them to you for any position we had.
And could you just recap the process of adding positions to this, or how that all works?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, and first I'll say this. I mean, I see some of you in the audience that I feel like I didn't do a great job when I first opened this up. I'm all about numbers and probably come across as being a little cold. But there's people in this room that it's not easy for. There's people that this could impact, and just want you to know that the services that you've provided over the last 2 years have been incredible for our students. And again, I know it's not easy, and I don't want you to feel like it hasn't mattered to us. I mean, I know from the get-go we said we have COVID funding for this amount of time, but we really appreciate your efforts, and everybody that's here this evening that either is impacted by this potential list that could go through, or for those COVID people that are hoping that something could be put into this budget. So having said that, we have a process that's on our website, and so we next week is a public forum for that, for people to come and offer their opinion on things and advocate for things. And if the board, I can't remember the date, but it's the second reading of the budget in probably the end of April, 1st of May, where it becomes the board's budget. It goes from kind of the recommended budget by the administration, then the board has to formally vote on it. And in that time, that's where, the process would be where the board would have to kind of come to a consensus about adding something to the budget. And like you said, we would ask Deb to do those numbers so that you would know what it does to the taxes in our towns. Or, the board could also, you could direct us to cut in other areas, but, this first attempt, I would say, wasn't easy.
So right. So, you're asking the right questions, and that's what we'll do. So as it goes forward, and we'll see what everyone says. I think it's next Monday, right? Yeah. So next Monday, when folks come and we talk about it again, I think we'll get even a more expanded list. And then that's what we do. We sit down and we brainstorm. So, okay, you want to add these 3 positions in, or you want to take something else out, and you can see how much everything's going to cost, come up with some different numbers to say, well, and then, as Abby said earlier, okay, well then if you added this in, it's going to cost this much. How does that affect the percentages? If you take this out, can you counter it? So you can look at all these different scenarios, and we will, and so that we can, we can be educated when it's time to vote on that budget. And then, we all know that after that, there's the town meeting, when people can still advocate, even after it's been done. People can still show up and advocate if there's still something that was not, that something was not put in or something like that. But, it's up to us to say if this is what we're hearing from the public, and if someone's get added in, and as Jennifer said, maybe something else is taken out, maybe it's all added in. I don't know, but then you'll see what the range of numbers are and how it affects the towns and the taxpayers. And then we as a board will have to make that decision going forward as to what that budget ultimately will look like. But there's plenty, still time to do that. Obviously, that's why we're beginning the process now. Sorry. Other questions from the board for Patrick on this overview? Does it make? Not asking if you agree or disagree. It's not about that. It's just, do you understand, Kurt?
Yeah, I guess there was a request to see what the budget looked like if the 9.5 COVID positions were put in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to compare the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess I was just wondering, so Patrick mentioned 1.2 million in cuts from what was originally submitted by the administrators. Would it be helpful for that to be put, to see what that looks like if that was also put back in? If possible, just clarifying that. Or
Yeah,
asking
I mean, we
Deb
can,
or-
well, yeah, what we can do is we can ask for a few different scenarios, just so if people really want to see numbers. Yeah, I mean, that's how we got to this, was we looked at all these numbers and we said, wow, well, that increases by this amount, that increases, tried to pare it down to a place where we said, okay, a good starting point might be these percentages to the towns while still keeping all of this intact within the budget. And so, yeah, we can always look back and say, if you added 5 positions, if you cut this position, whatever it was, and come up with it. So we'll still be working on it. That's why today's important. That's why next week will be important, because we may hear from other people about other aspects of our budget. Jennifer, go ahead. You have a question.
And this budget, we're still in negotiations. Obviously, there's so many people here today. So that's
another big factor,
unknown
yes.
before we start adding back things, is that that's not been resolved.
No,
right?
so everything at this point, labor put in here is a placeholder with saying, okay, maybe it'll be this, we don't know. It could be more, we don't know. It could be less, more, whatever. We don't know what that looks like completely, because there's three different contracts? Yeah, three different contracts that are currently being negotiated. So it makes for even a more difficult year. It happens to be a really difficult year, and then it also happens to be a contract year. So there's a lot of moving factors. So, but that doesn't mean we can't also look at other positions just for cost. People want to know, we're being transparent about it. Yeah, it would be this, X amount. It would raise taxes X amount. And it's good to have the information out there. But yes, we are in negotiations. So hopefully those can be, at a good place and settled before we vote on an actual budget. Otherwise, things can get messy. Yes.
And to be clear, the school budget doesn't control what you pay for taxes. It's one component. It's a big
Right.
component, but a big component also can be the increased cost for county services. So we've seen those blow up recently, those go into the budget, and then increased costs for everything else that happens in your town goes in there. So it's not a direct correlation between the budget going up this percentage and your taxes going up this percentage. It's one
Oh,
part
right.
of
No,
that
no,
big
it's
pile.
the,
And
right.
so that's why it makes it very hard to say the dollar amount your taxes will go up.
No, it's
Just
I'm
this.
saying what the percentage will be to the towns. We don't know. Everything is right. Individual. It's a factor. Right. And it makes it difficult because coming through COVID and everything right now with pricing, as Patrick said before. So you got your energy costs, your maintenance costs, everything's gone up. Well, it's also gone up in the county end, right? It's also gone up if town wants to buy an ambulance, if you want to do all that stuff. So everything's got, and then of course you have the contracts for labor, which obviously everything's gone up. So people are looking for raises and looking for things they want. So we have to take all of these factors into account as we're coming up with the different numbers, the different percentages, and what we think the community will be willing to pass and pay for. So that's why these public meetings are so important. That's why I'm really happy everybody's here. Other questions for Patrick on the process? Yeah, and Anita.
This doesn't include the CPP program either, right? This eliminates
No,
that.
and it doesn't have any of the COVID positions.
Okay.
And I can resend that list of all the COVID positions to you guys to just remind you, but no, it does not include CPP.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about the direct impact it might have to retain that program on this budget, and what the impact of that program has been on our graduation rate since it's been in place. I would like to just put it out there for food for thought that to the rest of the board, that program, I feel like it's something we probably would have considered even without COVID money, that had it been proposed to us, if the pandemic had never happened, it would have been something we would have seriously considered adding as an opportunity for our students. So I really think we need to think long and hard about losing that program.
Yep, thank you.
We can get that for you, Adina, for the next meeting.
Jamie?
I just wanted to share a conversation I had with a young student who's in that program today who said she dropped out in 6th grade, and she said her life changed when she met the teachers in CPP, and now she's excited to graduate. So really was very powerful to speak with her today.
Yeah, go ahead, Patricia.
Since I'm new to this budget process, we're proposing a % over for the towns, but how do we know, or I guess from experience, how do we know what % the town will want to pick up? Or like, there's a lot of factors, as Jen's pointing out, but it seems people here today would think that adding a school nurse or some of the other positions the town would readily pay for, but that's just a small sampling of our town here. So how would the board know if it's a good idea? I mean, what would sway them to say, I think Phippsburg really needs this, or this, or, the CPP, or how do you guys know just from experience because obviously we don't want to put out a budget that and doesn't get voted in, right? So they were like, and then we have to go back to the school board. So you guys have all the experience. I'm just not really clear
Do you want to answer?
what is a swaying factor here.
Swaying factor. I think, well, it's just, like I said, this is a difficult year. And as Patrick said, it hasn't been, I think occasionally over the last several years, has maybe been a coaching position. There's been a program here or there. There's been one thing that by including it in the end or something that didn't break the budget. This is the first time in my experience, and you've been here longer, but that we've never faced something. I don't want to eliminate any positions. And then there's the COVID positions. So what can we keep? But we don't want to eliminate current ones if we could help it, but we don't want to, and we're cutting all these, certain extracurriculars out and all these things. And we're trying to figure out the best way to balance all of that. And this is not easy because this is the multi-factor and made more difficult because it's a negotiation year. It's nobody's fault. It just is. It just all falls on that. So you've got that variable that every year is not a variable, but it is this year. So that's so we can't just build it into the budget saying this is the number. We know what it is. So there's a lot of it. And Jennifer.
And too, Patty, I mean, we are individual towns, but we are also this one district. So if any one town wants to do more, it becomes the financial responsibility of the entire district. I have just seen in the board report today that I believe that Phippsburg donated some books to every child in their classrooms, and I lived in West Point Village for a while in my youth and went to Phippsburg School. I know the impact that school has on that community and how willing they are to help. And I've never heard of a school turning back money to help out with certain things. A position is so much more in depth, of course, because it's not just the position, it's all of that huge impact behind the position in the school's responsibility. And once you get somebody in, then you're tied to that person pretty much until they choose to leave or retire in most instances. So it's a long-term commitment for a school to take on a position. But certainly there is fundraising. There's, the town can help as they want to. And that town certainly has in some remarkable ways. And I think it's true also that if we look at this budget, it's not just 3% this year. It's that budget now grows 3%. And so next year, as a math person, as we both are, that 3% gets bigger and bigger, compounds just like interest does. So we're not just voting in from one year, just X amount of money. We're voting in that amount of money and that percentage for all years following that, especially when it comes to staff. And I too, I would say, I know what it's like to have my position cut from this district. That's why I stopped working here. And it was really hard and really sad. And I thought I did a great job, but I also realized that was consolidation, and that's what happened. And sometimes we can't do everything we want to do. And I had to go off and find more work, and I, didn't have anyone supporting me. So I know it's a sad and hard thing to do, but sometimes that happens, not often with this district. I think we've done really credible things, and we'll keep trying to do as much as we can with the balance of our resources.
Jamie?
So could I ask that for next week, we're provided with this packet, but with the Pittsburgh nurse and CPP and those positions built in? I mean, am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, of course you're allowed to do that. And we want to, yeah, I mean, of course you are. And I think just maybe want to be very specific what you're asking for.
Yeah,
which
I think
Okay.
there's a
more,
lot of positions.
I mean, one thing I
Well-
need you to be specific about is, where do you want to see that nurse position at an increased amount of time percentage, or do you want to see it at full time or both?
Full-time.
You want to say the full time? I mean, you might as well, I'd put it in for both. I'd do like a 0.6 and a full time, just so you can see what the numbers are.
Yeah.
That doesn't hurt. And then you're asking, and you're also asking for the CPP positions?
CPP.
And what about the social worker?
Yes.
Yes to, well, there's a couple social workers, so
I think that
there was one
I
at,
mean,
one at BMS.
Yeah.
Yeah,
VMS,
And
the
then-
shared
then there's a shared one with the
between the
elementary.
elementary schools and high school.
Okay.
Am I missing any others?
I mean, there's, yeah, I mean, that's
I mean, I
fine,
know
just
that
to,
there's 10.
well, I know, but you, and that's fine, and some,
And I think Kurt has asked to see those 10
Right.
perhaps. So I'm just asking
So-
for
so why
maybe a
not-
middle ground.
so maybe what we can do is based on this, maybe I can talk to you tomorrow, and we'll come up with that and some other things, and we can email folks to see if, are these scenarios you want to see, and if you think of anything else, because it's not like, this is it. We just want to have some expansion so we can have a more detailed discussion next week. But yeah, Jennifer.
And so I guess I would ask anybody on the board who wants to add something back in, could you also add, are there things in here that you would like to cut? Is there a way to make that budget neutral? So
Right.
if we're going back and asking for all these positions and these programs, I'm just saying, so could you also come prepared as a, either ask Patrick ahead of time when he's doing this to see where you could make equal cuts, or ask him to make the total amount be, where else
Right, how
he
do you
could
make it,
cut.
how do you either make it equal or not
Right.
as much of an increase?
Right,
or
how many programs could we cut? I mean, are there positions,
Right,
other
what would it
positions
look at?
that we'd like to decrease? If there are co-curricular, sports, other programs that we're willing to cut to make it be more
Yeah,
budget
so we can
neutral, I
look
think
at
that
all,
would be
we
a
can look
good-
at all of that. Yeah,
That's what
I think
would like to
people,
ask.
yeah,
We're gonna
and
give them
I
an
think
increase.
that's what it can come, that would be a part of it. I think some of what people were asking was they did want to see, and there's nothing wrong with showing folks, this is the impact if you put this position or added all these positions or kept whatever positions we were talking about cutting. This is how it would affect it. These are the percentages. And, and then you can have a conversation about, is it, some people might say, hey, it's not that bad. Or people might go, oh, wow, that's a big increase. And, now I get it.
So I guess I would like to ask that
Yeah.
part of that process, that Patrick also comes up with the equal cuts. If we add those back in, if we're looking at the budget,
Sure.
whatever that number is, where else would we cut to make those positions budget neutral?
Right.
That total amount of money would be good to look at both sides.
Right, I understand. That makes sense. Any other, Kurt, you okay with that? Because you were asking about, all these different scenarios too. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, respectfully, I don't think we should be expected to have it be neutral if we're looking to save positions. I don't think we should be, I don't think it should be compulsory for us to come up with cuts.
It's not compulsory. She's just asking that if you see anything in the budget that you think could help, so maybe the increase, it's not even about neutral, but that maybe, okay, it wouldn't be as much of an increase. She's just asking you to look at it. You don't have, you can, that's just how she would look at it.
Happy to look at it.
You
Thanks
don't
for
have,
bringing
it's nothing's compulsory. This is really about brainstorming, which we had done before. Like I said, as Patrick said, we had to start somewhere. this was a good attempt to pull back a lot to say, look, this is where we are. This is what the percentages look like. Some people might think it's a lot. Some people might think, oh, we can go better than that. That's fine. That's what this is for. It's why it's called a draft. It's why it's called a first reading. And now you're all coming up and we've heard folks and they say, hey, what if you throw this position back in? Or what if we added this? And let's look at it. That's fine. We have some of those numbers already. We just haven't folded into this particular one yet, but we know the costs of these positions. We could fold that back in, look at a few different scenarios. I think we'll want to pare it down to 3 or 4 so it doesn't overwhelm everyone, just to give, and that's what we can talk about this week, just so that when people are looking at it, they have an idea of more of a range. So it's like, all right, if you put this many in, you just add this, you just add the nurse, it's this, you add this 3 positions, it's this, add everything back in, it's this. Then if you do more cuts, obviously you could pare some of that back. I think that's a good way to approach it, so that when we come back together this time, right, 6 o'clock next week, we'll be able to go over that, and that'll be the only thing on the agenda, and we can talk through some of this stuff, and people can, be shocked, not shocked, happy, whatever it is, and go through that and have a good discussion about it. So no, nothing's compulsory. You just, if there's anything else specific you think of, let us know, and we'll work on it over the course of the week.
Is that meeting in this room or the auditorium?
Well, considering I don't know if folks are coming back. Yeah, if I wish we had known you were coming, we would have been in the auditorium. If you think you may come back, then we'll put it in a larger room. Plan on it? Okay. That's fair. We can do that. Yep, then everyone will have a place to sit. And I'll have to make sure Ross doesn't fall asleep. All right, because they'll be in the comfy chairs in the auditorium. I always pick on Ross. He knows that. Okay, so any other, before we move forward, we're almost done, folks. Anything else regarding the budget tonight? Everybody, go ahead. Megan, I know it's been bugging you. What is it?
Well, I just want to make a point, and I understand, rising costs of everything and the stress or what have you put on taxpayers too, but we're also talking about the children of our community, and schools are different, and working in a school now is different, and the needs of kids are different. And I just don't think our children should suffer because everything in our country is rising. And I just want to make that point too. I understand taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer. That's why I'm here. But I'm also a parent, and I'm also an educator. And so I see it all, and just, and I don't speak that well, so I'm sorry. But my point is that we also have to remember that we're from 4 years old till maybe 19 years old. We are educating these kids, and the CPP. I'm glad you brought that up, and on all that stuff. So.
No, you're doing fine. That's great.
Very nervous.
No, you're. You always speak well and from the heart. Yeah. And so think about it. If you don't have the details tonight, feel free to email me or Patrick if there's something you come up with that you're looking for. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. And any of you, if you have any more specifics, just let us know. We can, we want to make sure we're giving folks some good things to look at and have a more detailed discussion. All right. Anything else on? Yeah, Aurora.
It's also kind of on the position cuts things, just because that's, I think, what students are most aware of. But I know obviously we can't keep everyone, but just from the student perspective, I've heard a little bit from rumors just going around on which positions are being cut. And I guess just for the positions that are being cut, I guess I want them to know that the students do care, and a lot of them are scared to lose some of their favorite teachers. So, yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Okay. I think on that, we're going to end the budget discussion for now. I want to thank everybody else for coming again, and for all of the board's input. And Aurora, thank you for that last note. We just have a couple more things tonight. A first reading of the board policy ECAF. Oh, wait. Oh, I skipped calendar, the most important part. Sorry, Katie. Went right over it. School calendar, Katie.
So you all have a copy of the proposed draft calendar. We went through the usual process with our sending schools and believe that we'll be fine having 5 or fewer dissimilar days, which is the law. And so that looks good. And honestly, I don't have many details because this is almost exactly the same as this year. The only difference truly in terms of where days fall is the November PD day, because it's a presidential election, will be on a Tuesday, so our schools won't have students in them.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Because that
Yep,
usually falls.
we did that before, I
Yeah, that
think.
usually falls later in the week.
Yep. Okay.
And that's really it.
And it's still after Labor Day.
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
That's what everybody's been asking me. When's the calendar and is it after Labor Day or not? Okay. So this is an action item. Does anyone have any questions for Katie on the calendar?
Love the new format and the holidays.
Yeah.
Very inclusive
Thank you.
holidays.
Yeah, thank you for doing
I'm
that.
happy you noticed. That was part of
Yeah.
our work with Dustin.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. Thank you.
For people like me who still cannot remember when school starts and ends, especially on half days, can you add that to the calendar, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's true. Even now, I'm like, when are you home, kid? What's going on? Okay, we need to vote. Yeah,
I move approval.
and I need a second. Second from Megan. Any other questions, details? No? Okay, all in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you all. Thank you, Katie. I know that's not always the easiest thing to put together. All right, now we're going on to the reading of board policies. No action tonight, but if you have questions on the ECAF, video surveillance on school property, you had it in your packet. Are there any questions? This is, again, is this all just a regular update? There wasn't anything prompting? Okay. So if there are no questions, any? No? Okay. So if you come up with any after reading through it, let us know. I'm going to hand it over to Patrick for personnel items.
Yeah, 2 resignations just to report on. Lawrence Kovacs, who was on a year leave of absence this year, decided that he's enjoyed his year leave of absence and wants to make it permanent. We certainly will miss him, so we'd like to thank Lawrence for 13 years of service to the district. Caitlin Geary Seegers, she's a ELL Ed Tech 3 district-wide, and thank her for 3 years of service to the district. Next, retirement, Sandra Gorsuch Plummer, who's here in the 3rd row. I'd like to thank her for 11 years of service as Phippsburg Elementary principal. And then I have a action item for the board to consider. Is we have a nomination for Bath Tech new director. And we're excited to nominate Tim Gagnon, who is currently the assistant principal, has been for the last 12 years at Brunswick High School. And prior to that, he was a technology education teacher at Brunswick, as well as Lewiston High School. We had 7 applications. We interviewed 5 people. We had 5 administrators, 4 teachers, 1 support staff, and 1 board member on the committee. And Tim rose to the top, very impressed with him, and he would start on August 1st here. So I need
we need a motion.
I need a motion.
Move to approve.
Jamie, need a second? Megan, any questions or discussion? No? Okay, all in favor? All right. That is approved. Thank you. 14.0 board goals. Jennifer, did you have any reference to our board goals?
Budget, budget, budget,
Okay.
budget. Hits all
right.
4.
Got it. It does hit everything. Well said, and the shortest goal thing yet. Okay. 15.0, set next meeting dates. So our next, as we've said several times, and it is not April Fool's, it will be April 1st. And it won't be April Fool's. We won't be in a smaller room. We'll actually be in the auditorium. And that'll be at 6 o'clock. I think we can get the auditorium, right? Is there any, hopefully? If not, they might be rehearsing, so it might be the gym. Okay. Got it. That's right. They're going to be rehearsing. All right. So it'll be in the gym. 6 o'clock next week, and then regular meeting being after spring break, the Monday after, which will be, or actually a week after that, April 29th. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And Megan, who I know wants to stay, but she's going to say no. Okay, all in favor? Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Question to ask.